ヒューマン人間その起源を探るのシリーズの今回
Of the last great ape species surviving in the wild, 3 are found in Africa and 2 in Southeast Asia. Despite the fact that the history of research is longest for the orangutans of Borneo and Sumatra, our understanding of their social system lags behind that of the chimpanzee and gorilla. I think this is largely due to the difficult conditions for research and the nature of the tropical rainforest in the regions where they are found.
なかなか環境が熱帯多雨林であるといったことや、それから、観察が非常に困難だといったこともありまして、この社会の理解がですね、チンパンジーゴリラと比べて大変遅れたんではないかと思います。Dr.
Akira Suzuki has spent the last 15 years in the rainforests of Borneo observing these orangutans. Thanks to these great efforts, he has begun to reveal the wider picture of orangutan society. In the past, it was known that orangutans led relatively solitary lives. However, the full details of their solitary existence is only now becoming clear. We are beginning to obtain more details about what they eat, how their ranging patterns are affected by fruiting patterns, and because of individual identification, who meets with whom where and for what purpose. These are all the results of diligent and patient observation over many years. Let us begin by looking at the behavioral ecology and society of the orangutan.
追跡によって次第に、その社会の実態が明らかになりつつあると、そういう現状ではないかと思います。それではまずはその、オランウータンの、行動、生態、社会といったものをご覧いただきたいと思います。
Indonesia is made up of several islands. The capital, Jakarta, is on the island of Java. The other main islands include Sumatra, Sulawesi, and Kalimantan. For this program, we visited Kalimantan. Kutai National Park, directly below the equator, is located a little over 100 kilometers to the north of Samarinda, the capital of Kalimantan State. Kutai National Park was established in 1985 to protect the animals and wilderness of this lush tropical rainforest. Wild orangutans can be found in the primary forests and riverine regions of the Singata River within the approximately 20,000 square hectare national park. In the Malay language, orangutan means people of the forest. This great ape species can only be found in Southeast Asia on the islands of Sumatra and Kalimantan. On average, a male orangutan is approximately 1 meter tall and weighs roughly 80 kilograms. Most full adult males have characteristic folds of fat around the face. This is absent in females, who weigh roughly half the weight of males, or on average 40 kilograms. There is clear sexual dimorphism among the orangutans. The young will follow their mothers closely until the age of 5 to 6.
I have
studied orangutans in the wild for the last 15 years, since 1983. Prior to that, I studied wild chimpanzees in East Africa for another 15 years, from 1964. I began my study of orangutans to learn more about the differences between these two ape species. The gorilla social unit consists of a family-like structure of one adult male and several adult females. Chimpanzees, on the other hand, form groups consisting of multiple males and females. They range widely across the forest searching for food. Depending upon availability, they join together or split up into smaller groups. In contrast, orangutans are said to lead relatively solitary lives. Today, I will focus my attention on this issue, looking more closely at the society of orangutans.
単独生活者と言われるようにメスが分散しているわけですけれども、それのその社会構造をどう紐解いてつなげて考えていけるかということが、今日の話の核になっていくと思います。
A day in the life of an orangutan begins at the crack of dawn. That clump of vegetation in the center, first thing after awakening, they defecate. Female orangutan with her baby. She begins to move. Orangutans sometimes come down to the ground level to travel, but these long-limbed, highly flexible creatures spend most of their time traveling up in the trees. The infant gives birth to the next sibling, and offspring will stay close by, usually for the first 5 to 6 years of its life. Orangutans spend close to half of the entire day foraging and feeding. The rainforest in which orangutans live is made up of a diverse variety of plant species. Variety of fruit species available changes from season to season. An orangutan day consists of repeated bouts of foraging and moving with intermittent rests. Just what kind of foods do orangutans eat? Their favorite food is said to be fruit, but they also eat leaves and flowers of the durian tree. One of their favorites is this flower known locally as marigara. They eat only the petals. A characteristic fruit of the tropical rainforest is the durian. Flowers of this species are characteristically enveloped by the perianth. Observe that they remove the perianth and eat only the immature petals inside. They never feed too much on just one species. Instead, moving from place to place, they create their menu from a variety of different species. Orangutans leaves of trees, but they also like the leaves and buds of this epiphytic orchid. Orangutans can also frequently be seen feeding on the bark of trees. The branches and bark of some vines contain considerable amounts of moisture and are frequently eaten.
オランウータンはもともと頼った生活をしていると言われてますけれども、
Orangutans were previously thought to depend largely on fruits. However, my observations show that they depend heavily on bark. 30% of the orangutan diet in the primary forests consists of bark. The remainder of their diet is made up of fruits and leaves. Orangutans spend most of their day feeding on fruits, followed by bark and leaves. Orangutans use a peculiar technique for feeding on the fruits of rubui. This technique is always used when eating these spiny fruits. The tiny fruits are gathered in the hand and rubbed against the branch to remove the spines before eating. Let us take a closer look inside the rainforest to see what complexity has nurtured their knowledge and skills for survival. This is Tengawan, a member of the persimmon family. It grows to be quite large and is home to a number of epiphytic plants. Orangutans frequent these trees to feed on the epiphytes. This is the stump of a Borneo ironwood tree called ulin. The tree was cut down in the 1930s before the area was made a forest reserve. The stilt houses of Indonesia are made from the wood of these trees. Before the invention of chainsaws, they were cut by hand. Here you can see the scars where it was cut with handsaws. After the area became a reserve, cutting in this forest stopped, and these old stumps have remained unutilized by the local people. In areas of the tropical rainforest unscathed by fire, lush vegetation still remains. In these forests, not only the orangutan, but a variety of insects peculiar to the tropics can be seen. Let us now look at the secondary forest created by the remains of an old slash-burn garden. These forests look sparsely vegetated, but it is actually the remnants of an agricultural field abandoned along the riverside. The entire forest was burnt down in 1983 by a fire that swept the entire region. At that time, all the leaves on the trees fell and left the area looking like a temperate deciduous forest in winter. In the aftermath, fast-growing pioneer tree species sprouted up everywhere. These are the pioneer trees. Orangutans utilize this forest a lot. While this is a national park on the equator, if a forest fire sweeps through, it would burn everything in the forest down. In the valleys where the soil is more moist, primary forests survive such fires. The orangutans move seasonally between these two forest types. In this season, the forest surrounded by mountains is abundant with durian species. There are about 10 species of bird durian here. When the trees begin to produce fruits, the orangutans start to eat even the young ones. Males enter the mountains in search of these fruits when they become available. Compared to females, males are more dependent upon fruits. During this season, males tend to spend most of their time in the mountains and do not come down to secondary forests along the river. Let us search for males in the primary forest where fruits are most abundant. This male was in the deep forest where fruits are most abundant. It is difficult to see the huge lumbering figure giving alarm calls from the dense vegetation, but it is no doubt a male orangutan. There is his face. Seen from the side, his brow ridge protrudes only slightly, but his eyes are set deeply in his face. The area from below his nose to chin is round and protruding. The protruding folds around his face are fatty deposits and stick out noticeably. This characteristic is found only in adult males. There are a number of fruit species located around here, but there is no sign of other orangutans in the area nearby. At ease, he eats to his heart's content. A squall suddenly erupts in the tropical rainforest. When a heavy squall such as this one comes along, orangutans take appropriate measures. This individual begins to break off and gather a number of branches within arm's reach. After he has gathered enough, they are fastened like an umbrella on top of his head. This area is located within Kutai National Park. The mountainous area to the left is primary forest. The lower area along the stream and to the right is secondary forest, where a garden used to be. Adult males spend much of their time in the primary forest, while females with offspring tend to spend most of their time in the secondary forest downstream. Many mother-offspring pairs utilize the area along the river forest. These pairs are spaced apart about 100 meters from each other. The mothers live in the secondary forest with their offspring. From infancy to around the age of 5 to 6 years, the young are under the protection of their mothers. Each adult female maintains a home range of around 1.5 to 3 square kilometers. However, it is not at all unusual to see several females up in the same tree feeding. Through long-term observation, it has become clear that females with overlapping home ranges tend to be sisters, or mother and daughter.
Orangutan の母子は前の子供を産んでから4、5年経つと母親が発情するわけですけれども。
Orangutan mothers give birth every 4 to 5 years. Offspring tend to move away from their mothers at around 5 years when the mother starts to mate again and gives birth to the next infant. For the first 1 to 2 months of life, the infant clings tightly onto the belly or back of its mother and moves with her wherever she goes. After about 4 to 5 months, the infant begins to move away from its mother and starts to put leaves and branches into its mouth, at first only sucking on them. After the first year, the infant will move as far as 10 meters away and begin to eat on its own. things begin to change quickly at this age.
お母さんから10メートルぐらいも離れて自分で食べるようになるわけで、その辺の変化はかなり目まぐるしいところがあります。父という7歳になるメスの赤ちゃん、子供がいるわけですけど、
Her mother had a miscarriage last year and so didn't give birth. Normally at this age, Chichi would already have left her mother, but because she has no younger siblings, she continues to travel close. She is quite big to still be traveling with her mother. Even when she traverses from branch to branch, she still begs her mother to bridge and help her cross the gap. The orangutans share the forest with a host of other animals. The durian are in bloom everywhere. It is not just the orangutan that comes to feed on them. Orangutans are often attacked by swarms of honeybees. At such times, it does no good to try and chase them away. It seems to be the better strategy to quickly move away from the nest to a place in the bushes where the bees cannot attack. Sometimes, all one can do if attacked is to sit still and bear it. At dusk, the forest is filled with the sounds of emperor cicadas and breaking branches. This orangutan has begun to make its bed for the night. A bed is made in 4 to 5 minutes by placing together large and small branches. Thus ends a typical day for an orangutan in the tropical rainforest.
それでこれまでオランウータンの社会っていうのは単独生活者でバラバラな生活をしている。
Up until recently, it was believed that orangutans were completely solitary, with the exception of mother-infant pairs. However, it is now clear that there are other very close relationships among females and between males and females. When trying to understand their society, it becomes obvious that things do not differ all that much from the society of chimpanzees, in which a larger group splits up and spreads itself across the forest. The individual relationships do not really change all that much. The main point where chimpanzees and orangutans differ is the nature of the male-male bond. Social bonds among orangutan males are extremely weak. Males frequently are found alone. However, when one looks more closely, 3 to 4 males frequently appear from the same direction, out from the depths of the forest. It appears as if they are aware of each other's presence. When considered in this respect, this resembles the social pattern of male chimpanzees dispersed throughout the forest. I think this is the basic social pattern of fruit-eating great apes. Fruiting trees are dispersed throughout the forest and concentrated mainly in trees. Therefore, when orangutan males forage, they tend to gather out of necessity where these fruits are most abundant. but at the same time avoid direct contact with each other. This seems to be their basic pattern of social existence. The nature of food distribution and orangutan social structure seems to be closely intertwined. Lately, it is my impression that the social structure of chimpanzees and orangutans basically are not so different from each other than previously thought. The Sangata River forms the northern border of Kyoto National Park. Research here has been a collaborative effort over the last 15 years between Dr. Suzuki, park staff, and the local villagers. In order to follow orangutans in the forest, the first task is to cut trails. A 300-kilometer network of trails has been made. In the early morning before daylight, we enter the forest and return to the tree where an orangutan made its bed the previous night. Here we wait for it to awaken and begin the day. In pairs of two, at 4-hour shifts, we follow an orangutan all day long until it settles down again for the night. This is continued every day for 1 to 2 months per orangutan, recording their long-term travel routes and activity patterns. This is why it is essential that we have a good trail system in the forest. Location markers are placed every 50 meters along the trail. The red tags are visible from quite a distance, and we use them to tell each other where orangutans were seen to feed, nest, or engage in other activities. Using these methods, long-term research has gradually unveiled the details of orangutan behavior. This traces the behavior and ranging pattern of 3 females living along the river in the secondary forest. The moving line denotes the ranging pattern over 1 day. The glowing dots show where the individual slept. Over a 1-week interval as well, we can see that the 3 females occasionally approach close to one another, cross each other's paths, and even at times sleep in the same places. It is not yet well known at what age females begin to mate and give birth. In exceptional cases, some females may not produce their first young until their 20s. In captivity, females begin to mate and bear offspring at quite an early age. Even development among young is slower in the wild. 2 to 3-year-old captive raised individuals are the equivalent size to 4 or 5-year-olds in the wild. The interbirth interval of 6 to 7 years for mothers in the wild is also quite long. These differences are likely the product of nutritional stress. When a female comes into estrus, males come down from the mountains to follow and mate with them. It is the typical pattern of orangutan society for males to range over a wide area and interact with many different females. Leon, the mother of Chichi, is eating flower petals. After having miscarried last year, she is now just coming back into estrus. The young male Lutan has come to inspect the status of Leon. Unlike estrus female chimpanzees, orangutan females show no externally visible signs. Lutan approaches closer and closer. Unaffected by Luton's approach, Chichi and Leon continue to feed. A few days later, the three are seen resting together. They will soon start to mate. This is typical mating behavior. Young Luton is still inexperienced. In the beginning, things do not go so smoothly. Chichi interrupts them, and at times Luton is forced to move away. A large male approaches from the mountains. Young Luton leaves in a hurry. This large male is called Pepe. Pepe and Leon begin to mate. The female reproductive cycle is 29 to 30 days. A female's estrus will continue for a week to 10 days. The orangutan gestation period is about 264 days, and the interbirth interval ranges from 5 to 6 years. Leon is rather old, and because she miscarried last year, Dr. Suzuki thinks that this may be her last chance to conceive. For the next few days, the pair will travel and feed together while continuing their courtship. If Leon conceives this time, her relationship with Chichi will change. After the birth of her sibling, Chichi will move away from her mother and begin to travel on her own. After Leon's estrus cycle has ended, Pepe will leave and roam the forest in search of another estrus female. At most, a female's home range is roughly 3 square kilometers, while that of a male's may be as large as 100 square kilometers. This shows the travel data for the first week period of Pepe and Leon's consortship. It is clear that the two have been moving together. At times, even their night nests were made in the same places. Development in Indonesia is moving along at an incredibly high pace. In order to protect the orangutan, it is necessary to push for the preservation of larger tracts of tropical rainforest, to ensure that they will always have a place to live. It is extremely important and helpful when the local people who base their livelihood on slash and burn agriculture become involved in the orangutan research and efforts to preserve the forest. An important aspect in the attempt to move forward efforts to preserve the tropical rainforest is how to most effectively involve the people with park staff and researchers. Global warming is an ever-increasing problem. The cause of the greenhouse effect is said to be excessive use of fossil fuels and the overlogging of the world's tropical rainforests. This very serious problem is facing us head-on. The large-scale development of Indonesia's natural resources of gas, coal, and oil, and the damage caused by mining and forest fires is rapidly eating away at the remaining forested areas. It is uncertain just how many orangutan remain in the wild, but estimates for Kalimantan and Sumatra range from 10 to 30,000. Based on the research of scientists from Europe and America in the 1970s, it is commonly believed that orangutans live a solitary life dispersed within the forest. Myself and others first used the word fission fusion to describe the social organization pattern of chimpanzees. At times they dispersed, and other times they come together. I think there are a number of common points between the dispersed existence of orangutans in the forest and that of chimpanzees. Among these common points of reference is the fact that, unlike terrestrial gorillas who depend heavily on herbal vegetation, chimpanzees and orangutans depend largely on fruits in their diet. Therefore, the pattern of food distribution is heavily dependent upon the distribution of fruiting trees. Depending upon which species or individuals of a species are in fruit, the locations where they can be found are extremely variable. In response to this relative unpredictability, apes too are flexible in their grouping patterns. The distribution of food alone, however, does not totally explain their fission-fusion style of social organization. Their social environment, too, is a significant factor. The solitary nature of orangutan society is reflected in this fission-fusion social organization. I think that the mechanism responsible for uniting or maintaining such a society is the individual internalization of a loose social network within an area. Even though they live relatively dispersed throughout a given piece of forest, each individual who lives there recognizes those others living in the area. The knowing of each other's presence and their individual attributes, such as strength, age, sexual state, and so forth, reinforces the society's existence, even without a constant high level of direct social interaction among all its individuals. The society is maintained even in its dispersed situation. Orangutans diverged from the human line earlier than chimpanzees and other ancestors maintaining their unique social organization. I think that during this process, the solitary nature of orangutans was acquired and is a strongly internalized component today. The orangutans are a species that quite early on began to walk the road to hominization. Orangutans have lived in the rainforest this way for tens of thousands of years. There still remain many unsolved mysteries about their behavior and ecology. A number of these mysteries are gradually being solved, however, through the intensive efforts of scientists like Dr. Suzuki.
オランウータンは従来単独行動者ではないかということで片付けられてまいりました。
In the past, orangutans were simply described as living a solitary existence. While described in such simplified terms, orangutans seem to lead an incredibly complex and still somewhat mysterious existence. I think that the research of Dr. Suzuki is making great strides in increasing our understanding of their way of life. It becomes extremely difficult to tie together the three great ape groups, chimpanzee, orangutan, and gorilla. Like other pioneers of chimpanzee research, Dr. Suzuki was puzzled about the nature of chimpanzee fission-fusion society. It has become clear that the same characteristic grouping patterns of splitting up and rejoining again under certain circumstances found in chimpanzees is a fundamental trait of orangutan society. The loose association among individuals within the group, I think, is a common trait of these two apes. From this perspective, I think that we can now trace the phylogenetic and social evolution of this form of society among great apes. We have come a long way in deepening our understanding of orangutans since the times when we considered them to be largely solitary creatures. Keep in mind this picture of orangutan society now as we move on in this series to take a look at the society of chimpanzees and gorillas.
このオランウータンの社会というものを頭に置いて、そして後のチンパンジーそれからゴリラを見ていただければと思います。